guys were having a party.
What's up?
Hey. Shall we?
So this is the most witches I think we've seen kind of cumulatively in the MCU so far. Would you like to see Agatha and the cover maybe tangle some more magical characters in the MCU at some stage? And if
Yes.
so, who would you like to tangle with? Doctor Strange, Wong?
Exactly. I feel like that would be very fun to see Agatha with Doctor Strange. I would love to see her, I keep saying with Loki, just because they're both such mischief makers. So there's so many people. I'd love to slip into, like, I think it would be very fun to see her with any Avenger, just because I think that would be, the dichotomy would be really funny.
I love the kind of detective parody we see at the start.
Yes.
I could have watched a whole series of that, I gotta be honest, but very good.
We could have done a whole series. Jack and I were like, why is this so enjoyable to make? Like, it was so fun.
Big, like, Mayor of Easttown vibes, I thought, from that.
Yeah, Broadchurch.
So this show has some of the most significant LGBTQ plus representation we've sort of seen in
Yes.
the MCU so far.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could speak to how important you felt that was for the show and I guess for Marvel in general.
It's, we felt it very important for both of those reasons, because you're right. There is a huge portion of Marvel audience that has not been really been able to see themselves completely. And so this just felt, like Joe said, it's like the thing about it is that it's not, teen is gay, but it's not about that. So that also felt very, the normalization of it felt very, just feels like very of now. So that was also very important. I think Jack did an incredible job writing that storyline. And Joe is like so beautiful and so perfectly himself, and has always been.
It's great to have, I think Marvel has been sort of behind the times in bringing in queer characters, which, is just more because the characters in their stories don't really delve into their personal lives as much. But what I love about Teen is his queerness is a big part of him and is celebrated, but also not the only facet of him. He's got lots of sides of his personality, which is really great.
So in our research about witches, both historically and in pop culture, there's a very strong intersection of the queer community and witches. And so it felt necessary to pull that into the show, and also fun. So it's sort of the thing of witches have been persecuted and othered throughout history, and I think that's part of the alignment between witches and the queer community. And then Agatha is an icon. She's so performative. She is, in her essence, a drag queen. And so it felt important to pull sort of that brand of camp and theatricality and the hair, makeup, wardrobe, music of it. And so it's part of the fabric of the show.
I know it's a little bit tricky what you can and can't talk about, but if I ask you to sort of talk about your character, what can you say, and his intentions and kind of significance in the story?
Yeah, I mean, I always describe Teen as almost like the catalyst to the plot. He is the one who persuades Agatha to go down the road and go on this journey. And he's a big fan of witches and witchcraft and Agatha, and he's just having the best time, basically, is how I keep describing it. He's having the same way I was on set, just having a great time with all these amazing witches. And I think sometimes doesn't quite understand the gravity of the situations that he puts himself in.
Joe Locke plays the wonderful, mysterious teen who helps break Agatha free from her distorted spell. And it's his character who asks her to take him on the witch's road. He sees that she's missing her power. He has something that he's missing as well. And so if they were to survive the witch's road, perhaps they both will be able to find what they're missing. So there's definitely more that audiences can expect from him and his character and exactly who he is. But how that all plays out, you'll have to tune in to see.
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. I am my character, Sharon Davis. I have no idea. He's a boy that's there with this group of women, and I just kind of try to fit in as best I can, or not.
seems like you guys had a lot of fun making it. That's how it comes across. Was it as much fun to make as it seems, and was really sort of like really standout moments from filming?
No,
Just...
it was a nightmare. No, it was so. It was no, it was. It was like, you know, we would say it was the hardest thing we'd ever done and the most nourishing and fun. Like, this coven got along so well, and this group of performers is so incredible. So every day going to work was like, you knew you were going to be working on, and also the scripts. So every day you would just be so excited to get in there and the sets and the costumes. And so, yeah, it was like an actor's dream. Like, I couldn't believe that I would never have believed that this was in my future.
And finally, if you could cast a spell for Agatha in the MCU in terms of what comes next for her, what would you wish for? What would you be conjuring up for her in Agatha's future if it was up to you?
I mean, she is power hungry. So I think the spell would be to, on every character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to steal whatever power they have, leave them all just broken shells.
Yeah, it's a big power sponge.
A big power sponge. And then just littered with just humans with weird costumes on.
There's lots of rumours swirling, which I'm sure you're aware of, and it must be so tricky to like dance around them. But there's talk of the Young Avengers in the future and what could come and things like that. In theory, Play Along will be here. If that was an opportunity that emerged for you and your character maybe in the future, is that something you'd be keen on?
I mean, I would never say no to Marvel. So if they wanted me to come back in any way, I would always say yes.
Favourite character you'd love to like interact with? I know there's so many magical characters in the show. I wondered maybe like Doctor Strange and Wong at some stage.
Oh, Doctor Strange, I think would. Yeah, I think Teen would. You know, Teen is he loves learning from Agatha, and you know, Doctor Strange I feel like is inherently like a teachery figure in a way. So I think he could learn a lot from Doctor Strange.
I have to say, props on the American accent for
Thank
the
you.
show. Was that hard to master? Did it take a lot of work, or did it come quite easily?
Yeah, I think I started having sessions with the dialect coach like the week after I got cast, which was like 6 months before we started filming. So, I that was definitely something that I was terrified of, but in a good way. You know, it's exciting to do things like that.
And so, if I was to ask you if you could cast a spell to kind of make anything happen for your character in the future, or any of the characters are kind of within the show, within the MCU, and what comes next, what would you love to see? What would you like to see in the future?
I mean,
more seasons, or
if I could cast a spell, I'd make Teen the main character of every Marvel film ever in the future.
Bold, I like it.
Of course I would.
And would you still be called Teen if you're doing that? Like, it must be tricky being a character called Teen.
Well, I guess you'll have to watch the show and find out.
Fair. I really wanted to ask, there's really great parodies that you kind of see in episode 1 around the detective stuff. Were there any other concepts you wanted to play with throughout the show that maybe you touch on or weren't able to delve into anymore?
In the show, we get into other sort of parody and homage and pastiche, and yeah, it was different. You know, WandaVision was very sort of like carved out, and Agatha is a little bit more expansive, where we're pulling in lots of different influences and sort of like feeding the episodes that way. But yeah, the first episode is very much in that true crime procedural prestige drama, and that was always the idea. And it was like, selfishly, I just really wanted to make one of those shows.
It was very cool, very well done.
Thank you.
I was like, I could see a whole other show just in
I
this.
know.
think.
I have this vivid memory of being on set and like linking arms with Kathryn, and Kathryn being like, when are we going to make the show for real? And I was like, I don't know, but it feels like an imperative.
It almost feels like the MCU's first sort of proper foray into a musical territory. I wonder if you could speak a bit to that and that decision and how much you wanted to embrace music for the show.
Music was essential really because of how thrilling the experience was on WandaVision, you know, working with the Lopez's, and I desperately wanted to work with them again, but also because Kathryn's song, Agatha All Along, was this breakout bop, you know, from that show. And so I knew going into the show we would have to have music, and it really took on a life of its own. I feel like calling it a musical, I don't know, labels right now, who knows if it's not sort of a proper classic traditional musical, but there is an abundance of music and singing in it. Yeah, it just felt necessary for her character and for the world of witchcraft, which, you know, music, singing is sort of a form of incanting. It's a form of witchcraft. It's a form of casting spells. And so it just felt very right for us.
you know, I think that it all depends on the imagination of the storyteller. And Jack had an idea that there was going to be a spell that at the fulcrum of the entire piece that she was creating, and that spell would be a song. So it took on a musical quality. But I think we're open to all sorts of different genres and different types of storytellers, and different types of tones, not just on television, but in the MCU, in the comics, in Marvel in general. So you know, Agatha is in good company with how you know, peculiar a type of story it is.
Could you tell me a little bit how you wanted to approach this differently to WandaVision?
We wanted this to feel like a spiritual spinoff of WandaVision, but it is all about Agatha. So it's a completely new tone, whole new set of references. With WandaVision, we celebrated the golden age of television with different eras of sitcoms. And with this show, it's another sort of amalgamation, but we're celebrating the golden age of horror and fantasy. Craftsmanship was something that was so important to us on WandaVision. Just bringing all of our department heads into the creative process and allowing them the opportunity to come in with their best to approximate these eras of sitcoms. We were trying to do the same thing here. So what that actually ends up meaning is that we have taken a largely entirely practical approach to how we shot this show. Everything that you see on the show is in camera. So the Witch's Road, we never had a blue screen, green screen inside. We utilized miniatures and backdrops and special makeup effects to make sure that any environment that our actors were in felt completely real. And I think that really galvanized the cast and the crew. And I think that enthusiasm and love of craftsmanship is something that you'll feel on the other side of the screen.
If I was to ask you, is there a kind of genre, if I could make you pick today, that you'd love to delve into that you haven't touched yet, what would it be?
You know, I also produce What If, which allows me to play in a lot of different sandboxes. You know, you know, my first movie I ever produced at Marvel Studios was Ant-Man 1, which was actually a pretty good heist movie, and that's always been a genre that I'd love to return to.
Obviously, Vision was in WandaVision, and this kind of like follows on from there. We haven't seen much of him since, and there's kind of Vision Quest on the horizon. Is there anything you can sort of tell me about that? And is there any breadcrumbs that are laid throughout Agatha that kind of lead to that at all?
Terry Matalas, our showrunner on Vision Quest, is hard at work. He is a fan of the mythology. He is definitely he's definitely, you know, if you're a fan of Picard season 3 or you're a fan of 12 Monkeys, you know what kind of storyteller he is and how rewarding it is as a fan to watch what he puts on screen. So Vision Quest is certainly going to be rewarding to Marvel fans when it comes out.
Well, I can tell you that Vision Quest picks up after the events of WandaVision, similar to Agatha. We're very early days on that, but I think fans will be able to follow threads to there as well.
I really enjoyed Joe Locke and Aubrey Plaza in the show. I thought they'd be fantastic candidates for the Young Avengers if they qualify. What are your thoughts on that, or would you rather see them stay in the Coven alongside Agatha?
Joe Locke is a revelation. He's so great on screen. He's certainly somebody who we want to see a lot more of, and he has created a true icon in his portrayal of that character.
So Marvel's had a really strong time recently with the release of Deadpool and Wolverine after sort of a few middling releases and a bit of criticism from press and fans, but it seems like they're back on top, things are going great. Is there anything that you would really point to from a television perspective that you think is really going to move the needle and ignite fans' excitement that's upcoming?
I mean, you know, we are by our nature an experimental company. You know, we are our bedrock, our creative bedrock is the comics. You know, that publishes 80 issues a month and has been around for 85 years. And that experimental nature as storytellers is something that drives us. You know, we are going down roads that inspire us. And you know, on you know, Agatha is such an exciting show that continues the Wanda mythology, that leads to greater things in the MCU, but it's also a Halloween show, an adventure show for for all fans of Halloween, of horror, of adventure. And that's what I think I'm looking forward to most for the audience to see.
I really love the parody stuff that's happening in episode 1 around the detective sort of style. Were there any other types of show that you wanted to sort of send up or reference that you weren't able to squeeze in the time you had?
Oh my gosh, that's a really great question. Well, I can tell you that the pilot was always designed to be sort of like a lady detective spoof of that genre. It was something that Jack Schaefer was always really passionate about. And it's really fun to see Agatha try to break through from Wanda's distorted spell through that lens. And that definitely also gives us a wonderful WandaVision hit. But really what's wonderful about this show is that Jack, myself, the writers all came to the table with all the witchy fantasy and horror references that we all love. And all of those went into the pot. And I think if you're a fan of those genres and subgenres, there's definitely Easter eggs throughout. And there's a little bit for everyone to love hidden within the show.
Do you all have a bit of a musical background, and do you have a musical background yourself? Was it something you had to learn for the show, or did you already bring that to the game?
You're the first person to ask me that question. I actually did grow up playing the piano, but I played classical piano, and it's more a source of trauma than anything else. But I did do high school musicals, but it's not, singing is not something that I'm comfortable with. I feel like a lot of people grow up doing musicals. If you're like a theater nerd, that's sort of your entry point. But that was certainly, to revisit that was a challenge for sure.
Now, this is probably the most witches we've seen in the MCU so far. How would any of you feel about the idea of sort of tangling with other magical characters like Doctor Strange or Wong? Is that something you'd be up for?
I mean, absolutely.
I mean,
There's a ton of magic in the Marvel universe in the comics, so I'm just excited.
I'd love to see that fight sequence.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, why don't you pitch it for us?
I'll get right on it after this. There's so many incredible costumes throughout the show. I wonder if there was one that stood out for each of you.
I had this beautiful pink dress that I wore on the
She
road.
talks about every interview. She talks about the pink dress.
She does look wonderful in the pink dress. She looks, but
It's
Daniel,
a gorgeous pink dress, but she couldn't sit down, so she had to stand or she had to lean in her.
I mean,
chair.
yes, it was beautiful, but
Yeah.
also wrinkled really easily. But Daniel Salon was the costume designer who was brilliant and made everyone look so good. And there's so many little details that are also like a key into the character. And I think if you watch it, you'll understand more. But yeah, all the costumes were amazing.
yeah.
And I had basically a costume and mud. That's what I had.